in our discussion of chapter 13, where we began last week by talking about the beast of the sea. So I left this up because we're going to discuss this a little further tonight. This idea of the Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, and the beast, the sea, and the land out of chapter 13. Last week we talked about the one out of the sea. And so we spent a good deal of time saying that this is representative of an individual in history. Yes? No. What is this representative of? Okay.
World powers that put themselves in the place of God.
Okay. Yeah. World power, yes, but all world power? Which is where what she was clarifying. It's the ones, well, not necessarily, sometimes they assume godlike qualities, but this beast out of the sea would be like political in nature, world powers. And it could be all different flavors of political opposition to the church. Now, we began to talk about these concepts of how in premillennial view in particular, and dispensational view and futurist, where they've lumped these individuals into all together into one entity. And we're going to talk about, we're going to bring this all to a conclusion tonight so that you have an explanation of how to deal with this. And in doing so, we're going to be now moving into the second part of chapter 13, which talks about the beast out of the land, and we're going to discuss that. So, in your lesson notes, Lesson 10, Part 2, where it says he wages war through false religions. So that everybody's there, and that's going to encompass verses 11 through 18 of chapter 13. So why don't we read that? And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. And he exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. And he performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given to him to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image to the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And there was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast might even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the freemen and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead, and he provides that no one should be able to buy or to sell, except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. Well, now we're getting into some of the most common imagery and concepts that are out today on this subject. And this idea of the beast and the marks of the beast, the 666 and all that, which you see and popularized in all sorts of ways, TV and movies, and Hollywood has a lot of fun with this. So we're going to investigate tonight and realize it's not all that exciting. It's not as sensational as you would think it to be. So let's begin. And let's look at verse 11. And it talks about the appearing of another beast. Now, this is interesting. What is the first thing that we see about this beast? It says that he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. Now, just on the surface alone, does this remind you of anything? Does this compare to anything else? Does this have a correlation to anything else that we read about in the Bible? The horns? Well, those do show up in a number of places. Okay, what about the lamb? What do we know when we see a lamb mentioned, especially in the book of Revelation? Who's it normally referring to? Christ, right? So, it has appearance as a what? But speaks as a... Is there anything in the New Testament that speaks of those that have such an appearance, but their words don't actually match up with their outer appearance? Okay, on Bugs Bunny, there would be times when, what's that? Yeah, that concept's in the Bible, right? That the wolves will come in, and that we have a wolves dressed as sheep's clothing, or an angel of light, right? It says that Satan appears as what? Angel of light. It appears in such a way, but what actually is this angel of light speaking? Falsehood, lies, deception. So what we have here in this description, in the horns of a lamb and the spoke as a dragon, is a similar idiom to the wolves in sheep's clothing. Someone please read Matthew 7:15, and let's look at 19:20. While someone's looking up Matthew 7:15, 19:20, let's see what it says.
Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves.
Okay, that's Matthew 7:15. Yep. 19:20 says, and the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who had received the mark of the beast and those who worship his image. These two were thrown alive into the lake of fire, which burns with brimstone. So here in 19:20, it says the beast was seized, and with him the false prophet who performed the signs in his presence. So what is this imagery and stuff here that we see back here in 13:11 is speaking of false prophets, false religion. In verse 12, it follows, and he exercises, he, the beast that comes out of the land, all the authority of the first beast in his presence, and he makes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose fatal wound was healed. There's a definite relationship is shown between Satan's power and satanic religion. Now, when we talk about satanic religion, when you hear that phrase, what do you normally think of right away? What's that? The occult, right? So what this is speaking of is the occult. Or is it more? When we talk about satanic religion and the way that this phrase is used here in this understanding, should we limit it to people that openly worship Satan? Is that what this is limited to? Is that what this is speaking only of? Right, yes. Yeah, this idea, any philosophy or religion that is not in total accord with Christianity. I must read that again and listen closely. Any philosophy or religion that is not in total accord with pure Christianity is an instrument of the second beast. So now we talk about satanic religion, then what does that encompass now? If we understand it from that perspective, See, we have to draw a line here, don't we? Is this not a red line or a line in the sand? Any philosophy or religion that is not in total accord with pure Christianity is an instrument of the second beast. So, anything that is not pure Christianity, you could say, is an instrument of the second beast. And the second beast is under whose authority and power? Now, this might make some of us squirm a little because we don't want to draw that line, do we? Do we? Okay, all right, so there's been, okay, so you're talking about where within a certain denomination, they, for example, I believe it's the either USA Presbyterian or Presbyterian USA, headquartered where? You know where their headquarters are? Louisville, Kentucky, right next to the Yum Center. Right down in that same area, right by the 2nd Street Bridge. They will ordain gay or lesbian in the priesthood in the Presbyterian Church. That kind of some things we're talking about that, accepting. Now, there's some, you know what? I was going to read this quote later, but this is the perfect time. Who had a hand?
I know the sister, they are Presbyterian, but they don't belong to that one.
There is a different branch of it.
Yes, and I think theirs is the USA.
Well, now see, this is where it's going to become uncomfortable. Okay? Because where do we draw the line? See, the statement pure Christianity is very important. Because in the Restoration movement, don't we kind of hold to the line of pure Christianity? I mean, that's why we're here, isn't it? No? I hope so. I mean, I hope that's why you're here, is because we believe that that in accordance with the New Testament, as pure as it can possibly be. I mean, to the best of our abilities. I mean, we have every single thing 100% right. No, but something like baptism as the point in time when you receive the gift of the Holy Spirit and remission of your sins. We hold the line on that, yeah? We believe that's part of pure Christianity, right? So then what about those who don't say that? Then it's not pure in our estimation, is it? So what do we say? See, this is where it becomes uncomfortable. But this is because if we're logically going to say here that an entity that sprinkles babies for salvation, that's not pure Christianity, is it? And then at no point in time within that denomination, or you want to call it religion, do they immerse for the forgiveness of sins? Not pure Christianity, is it? See, this can be very uncomfortable. Go ahead. That is, in my estimation, a more difficult subject. When we start down that road. But yeah, that may be a can of worms we don't want to pop open right now, because yeah, that one's a little trickier.
I'm interested in knowing more about that as well. You know, like
About that?
yes.
About communion as far as
You know, I mean, for the people
linked to
who
salvation?
want to,
Is communion linked to our salvation? Directly linked to our salvation? See, that's a whole other discussion we're going to have at another time. We don't have time to pop that can of worms tonight. There's a little more thought on that than that's out there as far as. Now, see, the Catholic Church, they say that communion is a sacrament. It is, you have to take it for your salvation.
but only at their church. If they go to another church, then this is
that it has to be administered by a priest, and it has to go through the process of transubstantiation and all that. So yes. Yes, and then they have to perform the ritual, the rite that causes that to happen. So yeah, we don't want to go down that road right now because it's just really too much to. But what I'm getting at, there are things that we believe that are core doctrines of the Christian faith that are pure Christianity, that if varied from, that it's not pure. So that makes it, if we're going to connect the dots here, an instrument of the beast. That makes us uncomfortable. See, we got no problem saying Muslims or Mormons or, we got no problem with that, do we? I hope not. Or Jehovah's Witnesses, we don't have a problem saying those things. But when it comes to the things like denominations, and that tends to make us squirm a little bit, but if we're going to hold the line logically, we have to hold that line.
Where are we holding the line?
On pure Christianity.
And so with the denominations...
Okay. Yes, I did. Because this, in essence, is if we wanted to do a class on Restoration history, that denominationalism itself is sinful because it is divisive. It is sectarian. And many times those denominations are based on false doctrines. And it,
Same thing though in the Church of Christ and the Christian church. You got to be careful where you go. What's going on there?
well, in the Restoration movement, we have people that will claim Campbell and Stone and all those guys, and they're disciples of Christ. And the things that they teach now are not biblical. It's not pure Christianity. So that's something that we can look at a little bit more in depth. But I do want us to consider this. Any philosophy or religion that is not in total accord with pure Christianity is an instrument of the second beast. The priest of the emperor cult in John's day served the emperor and the empire by bringing people to worship the emperor. Now, this was very common in this time, so this has a very important, immediate context. In 95, 96 AD, what John's writing about here, this is happening with them, where there's a very close link between the priest of emperor worship and how they worked with the political powers. While these are separate entities, many times they're intertwined. The sea and land. So let me ask you this question. If we were to bring this forward to 2018 United States of America, is there a state-sanctioned religion? In America, 2018, is there a state-sanctioned religion? No? Yes? Maybe? Oh, yes, there is. See, that's the thing. They say that there's no state-sanctioned religion, but the state-sanctioned religion is secular humanism. Our government, that is the worldview that they support. That's rooted in Darwinistic evolutionary theory. And that evolutionary theory is the foundation for a worldview that is sanctioned by the government and taught to our children. And just go to our universities. State universities. They are churches of secular humanism.
Would you say secular what?
Humanism. And secular humanism finds itself very comfortable working with communist ideas. Again, I invite you to go to our campuses, because right now it is spreading like wildfire. Marxism and communist ideas are based in secular humanism. That's becoming very, very popular because that's the state-sanctioned religion. Now, does that cause any issues for Christianity in our society today? Yes. And another generation of those people coming out of the universities and stepping into positions of leadership in our government, in our businesses, and in our churches, is going to be, you're going to continue to see the oppression that comes out of this. Now, verse 13. Verse 13, and he performs great signs so that he can even make fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. What biblical account do we recall that had fire coming down out of the earth in the presence of men? Elijah and the prophets of Baal, yes? So in a way, a lot of things that you're going to find here is that there's a lot of imitation and mockery going on. The things of God are being imitated and mocked by Satan and his powers and his minions, if it were. And so he performs great signs so that he even makes fire come down. So this is a reference to that, but from an evil perspective. Someone please look up Matthew 12:24, and then someone look up Matthew 24:24. A lot of 24s. Matthew 12:24. Who's got that? Larry, you got it? Oh, I thought you were looking up like you had. You got 24:24? That's fine. Stick with that. Who's got 12:24? Phil, go ahead. Sorry.
But when the Pharisees heard it, they said, "This man cast out demons only by Beelzebub, the ruler of the demons."
Okay, what's 24:24 say?
For false Christ and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect.
Now, so let's talk about, now this is a time that when we can talk about these. Because many believe that, again, this is one individual, right? In dispensational premillennial view, this is one individual. All this lumped together. In fact, there was some quote today I saw that talking about that there needs to be a world government and a world leader and a world religion, one, and that there needs to be one individual over them all. And that's pointing to this, oh look, someone wants this, and that means this is that individual. That's the church. No, I'm talking. Yeah, but no. No, we're talking about religion. Everyone in the world under one world government. We're not talking about. That's not talking about government. That's talking about the church. Two totally separate things. Yeah, they say you've heard the term New World Order and all that kind of stuff. Well, I don't know if the quote was true or not, but it was attributed to Robert Mueller. I didn't look it up to verify it. It could have been one of those false news things that was out there. But so what? I mean, because, well, to someone that believes this, they're like, oh, there it is. Someone important calling for a one world religion and all this kind of stuff. They believe that's going to come in this individual. But this is not, these are all their own individual things. And so that's why I provided you with the paper tonight. And so I want you to turn to the bottom of page 7. where it says Francisco Ribera. This has the roots of what's called the futurist perspective, and that's where placing the events of Revelation and into the far distant future. See, what was happening, in a bit of a nutshell, there were a group of individuals like Luther and others that Luther came out of what belief system? Came out of Catholicism, right? And we have the Reformation. And so, what do you think his feelings were once he came out of Catholicism? Were they friendly to one another? They didn't really get along. In fact, there was the Reformation, and then we had what was called the Anti-Reformation. You guys ever heard of that? So there was a pushback against this from the church. And so one of the things that happened in part of this pushback is that this guy, Francisco Ribera of Almanacá, Spain, founded the futurist eschatology. Ribera placed the Antichrist in the distant future. See, this is an idea here at this point in time that what they did is they took the man of lawlessness of 2 Thessalonians and the Antichrist of John and the beast of Revelation. They lumped them together in one entity and threw them into the future. That's where this has its roots, in 1500s. He published a 500-page commentary on the book of Revelation. The primary elements of his systems are, flipping the page here, the bulk of the book of Revelation is assigned to the distant future. The Antichrist, or the man of sin, or the man of lawlessness. If you see man of sin or man of lawlessness, same thing. Would be a single individual who would abolish Christianity, rebuild the temple, and be received by the Jews. Antichrist's work, or the man of sin, would continue for a literal 3.5 years. The conflict with the Antichrist would take place in the Middle East. So these are some things. Now, these doctrines were put together in order to deflect criticism from the Pope, because Luther and his associates and those around said that the man of sin, the man of lawlessness, was the Pope himself. And so they were receiving that kind of criticism, and so they developed a system to deflect, and that's where this found its roots. The next paragraph down, eventually futurism entered into English Protestantism. Some scholars were urging the Church of England back to the papacy. This fact, coupled with the Reformation era in integrating the Antichrist, the man of lawlessness, and the beast of Revelation, is the foundation for past and current interpretations of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So, what does 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 say? Let's turn over there. Because there are some understandings and things that come out in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 when it talks about the man of sin or the man of lawlessness that we need to understand. All right. So, chapter 2, verse 3. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Let's go ahead and read through. Yeah, let's keep reading. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he may be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders. Now, in my Bible, the key commentary, remember what we said last week when we were looking at this? Here's what this says. The man of lawlessness, referred by the Apostle Paul here, is the same person referred to in other scriptures with other such names as the Antichrist in John's writings, and so forth and so on. So here we have another footnote that's pointing towards the premillennial dispensational view, okay? Which we do not believe to be true. So, what do we have here with the man of lawlessness? Was he already doing his thing? No. No. He was restrained. You guys get that? He was restrained. He was something that would be revealed. It was something that was going to happen in the future. And it says, let no one in any way deceive you, verse 3, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first. So there has to be some sort of great apostasy, a falling away first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed. So it's something that's going to happen. See, verse 6, and you know what restrains him now. So is it happening freely, or is it's restrained, right? That's what it says. So it's present, it's a future entity, and it's somehow restrained. Got that? It's very important. Now, what's another thing that this says about what he will do? What is going to be his? It's going to exalt himself and displaying himself as being God, taking his seat in the temple, displaying himself as being God. So it's somebody that is saying, "Worship me." Well, just hang on. Hang on. Hang on to that thought. We'll get there in a minute. We're not trying to identify who it might be. We're just laying out the criteria so far. Hang on. Hang on. Don't make me come over there. Nancy twists his ear. You done read the end of the paper, huh? You read the end of the paper, did you? Did you read the conclusion? No, I'm just kidding with you. No, I know you're thinking logically. Well, it does kind of make sense. So you can understand maybe at this point where maybe Luther and some others were onto something. Maybe. And why they pushed back against it. Now, here's the other thing. In the Antichrist of John, in many occasions, it says that they had already gone out from us. They were present. They were already doing their thing. They were already deceiving. And it says that. I mean, if somebody wants to look it up and read it exactly. So you have a contrast here on page 11 of this paper. You have a discrepancy between the man of lawlessness and the Antichrist. Is that the Antichrist of John was a present entity versus the coming or revealing of the man of lawlessness. So that's the first big difference between the two. Okay, so that we cannot put them in the same boat. So then if you go over to page 12, then you'll see that these are underlined. The next discrepancy was this. There was nothing inhibiting or restraining the Antichrist of John. Nothing. They were unrestrained. Whereas the man of lawlessness was restrained. There was something holding back at this point in time. So there's two differences right off of here, that they've already gone out, John said. And then over on page 14, the Antichrist of John, it said, many have gone out from us. Many. Every time it's referred to, it's a plural. It's a plurality. It's way more than two. There is no such thing as a Antichrist or an. There's not one. There's many. In fact, 2 John says that anyone who essentially denies a flesh and blood Jesus, this is the spirit of the Antichrist. So it's from that point forward. But specifically, those in that point in time were there were two branches of a up-and-coming heresy called Gnosticism, and that's who John was battling, and they denied flesh and blood Jesus. And so that's who he was dealing with, and there was a whole mess of them. They've gone out from them, and anybody who agrees with this has the spirit of the Antichrist. So if you sat here today and said, I do not believe that Jesus was flesh and blood, then you are in the same boat as them. You're just adding another one to that. It's plural. Now, the man of lawlessness, the man of sin, does seem to be a singular entity. Well, that kind of, singular entity. So we've got three main differences right off the bat here. Are there any more? I believe there's one more. There sure is. The fourth discrepancy was what they were primarily doing. The man of lawlessness, his primary thing was setting themselves up to be worshipped, setting themselves up to be worshipped, versus the incarnational denial of the Antichrist. And so, what we have here is a very clear understanding that these two have nothing to do with one another. You can't lump them together into the same individual and say it's this one person in history. Now, we've already established that the beast out of the sea is representative of all political power throughout time that has set itself up against and persecuted Christianity. So is that singular entity? No, it's taken many forms since that time. Now, when this was written, what was that entity? It was Rome. It started with Nero, and now we have Domitian, and it's a very widespread, state-sanctioned persecution, seek and destroy of all Christians. That's what's happening when this was written. So the beast out of the sea, when this was written at that point in time, was identified as Rome in the person of Domitian, but that's not limited to him. All they've done from one time to another is just handed the baton. Someone else did it. It's in other places. Right now in North Korea, same thing. Still happening. So land then is representative of religious or false religion that sets itself up against, but they work together with the political powers. Now, do we ever see any time throughout history where it was happening then in Rome? They said that for Caesar worship, and what was happening, the priests would bring people to the image of Caesar to worship him, and that was political and religion. I mean, they were in cahoots. Many times they're in cahoots. Don't have to be, but many times they are. So, now, what did it say about the beast out of the land? What was the beast doing? How was it operating? A false religion. What were they doing to? What was the beast out of the land doing to gain authority and to gain the ear of people? Am I right? Okay. Yep. I haven't forgotten you. You'll see where I'm going here. Miracles, signs, wonders, calling fire down out of the sky. That's a symbolic language for performing signs, wonders, and miracles, right? And we find out in the it's actually throughout all the Old and New Testament that there were those. What's one of the first major occasions that we see someone performing false signs and wonders as a sign of power and authority?
They went to take the people
Out of Egypt. Yeah. Moses did his thing, but then what did Pharaoh do? Called in his magicians, right, to replicate things. That's been, that kind of thing. It's happened for a long time. Now, but moving forward from 95, 96 AD and moving forward, you'll be surprised to know that these priests, they would actually, through some pretty neat trickery and stuff, they would actually, in a way, animate statues through movement and ventriloquism to make it seem like that the statue was speaking as a sign and a miracle and a wonder. This kind of stuff was going on right there, and different things like this have gone on from time where people have performed signs, wonders, and miracles in order to gain power. Now, going back to what you were saying, we talk about an individual, a power that was restrained. We talk about something that was already in the works, back in 2 Thessalonians, something that was already happening but restrained, that would be unrestrained at a certain point and then set themselves up to be worshiped. It does seem to fit. Because the restraining power, some scholars believe, was actually the Roman Empire itself. That as the Roman Empire lost power and faded out, what grew in power? The papacy. And you can understand the growth of the papacy that started out with so forth and so on, and then built up into that one individual that was over all the church. Okay, so you have the decline of Rome. At the same time as Rome is declining, then you have the papacy come into existence, and then Constantine, it was all interwoven in this, and how a state sanctioned Christianity, and when they moved the capital from moved the capital to Constantinople, and who was left in Rome when they moved the capital to Constantinople? The Pope was there, and when the invaders from the north came, who greeted them? The Pope. And so, I do believe that the man of lawlessness, according to my studies, is indeed the office of the papacy. So it's not one pope in particular, but it's a singular entity. The papacy is a singular entity that does set itself up to be worshipped and does perform signs, wonders, and miracles to gain authority. Did you know that in order to be saint, to gain sainthood, you have to be, the general rule of thumb as I see it, is that you have to be approved of 6 miracles performed. So, I Googled and found this interesting list of 12 of miracles that were performed by popes. Pope Fabian I, this was in the year 236. The way that he was elected, they believed this was a miracle. A dove flew into the room and landed on his head. Yep. Pope Urban I in 230. Urban and his followers had been imprisoned and brought before an idol to pray. Instead, Urban prayed to the Christian God, and the idol fell down, killing 22 priests. They believe this was a miracle that he performed. Pope Pius, Pius V, beat the Ottomans in 1571. Some things they believe happened on the battlefield. Pope Alexander I escaped a well-guarded prison. John Paul II. Pope John Paul II died in 2005 of Parkinson's, and 3 months later, Sister Marie Simon Pierre, who suffered from the same disease, prayed to him one day. She woke up able to move again. Later, doctors told a woman in Costa Rica, Floribeth Mora Diaz, that she would die within days of a brain aneurysm. She prayed to this pope, who's now dead, heard the voice tell her to not be afraid, and was healed with no medical explanation. Now here's a good one. Pope Cornelius I, his statue blessed the marriage of an unlikely couple. In medieval Germany, a lord's daughter fell in love with an artist hired to decorate a chapel dedicated to Cornelius, a 3rd century pope. The Lord said he would not give his blessing to the marriage unless the pope did. A devotional statue of Cornelius bowed from the altar and blessed the couple. There's more. Pope Clement I in 101 AD. Now, when was this written? Listen to this one. After he was martyred and thrown into the Black Sea in 101 AD, the waters of the sea receded until they revealed a marble tomb where Clement's body was found in a stone coffin. Every year, once a year, the sea would recede and reveal the shrine. I don't know. So, we have an individual that performs signs, wonders, and miracles that sets themselves up to be worshipped. I think there is evidence. Now, if you really, really argued with me hard and kicked me in the shins, I think that this is something that I would plant a flag at the top of a hill and not waver from it and break ties with you over. No. But I do think there's evidence for this, and there's other scholars who believe so too. What I will fight you on is that these two are not the same. Now, listen to me on this. Don't get confused. The man of lawlessness is this, but not all this is the man of lawlessness. Are you with me on that? Because any false religion that sets itself up, and then do we ever see a point in time when political power and religious power mixed within the Catholic Church? We have, just pretty much all of European history, right? But not. So I want to say this one more time. This does fall into this category, but all this is not this. With the intersection of religion and... Well, yeah. Well, this would still fall here then. But the papacy itself, here, and then we understand this. So, do we have an understanding now of this whole situation? Go ahead.
What's one more example of whenever it's not the man of lawlessness, but it is just the...
Okay, so if this is representative of the papacy, then it would be any other false religion that sets itself up, or philosophy that sets itself up against and it persecutes Christianity. Muslims.
So they wouldn't be the man of lawlessness?
No, because this is representative, I believe, by the papacy itself. But see, the papacy, it is a false religion that falls in this category. But this category does not summed up totally by this. This one fits within here. It includes it, among others. Mormons, Jehovah's, anything that, we're talking about extreme examples, but remember, see, when we talk about what falls in here, anything other than pure Christianity.
Okay. I'm a little confused.
Sure.
The constraint part, I didn't understand.
The restraining power.
Yeah.
If you do hold to the idea that it is the papacy, then it would be the Roman Empire.
Oh, okay.
The power of the Roman Empire actually was the restraining force. Caesar worship and stuff like that happened. But as it waned, you see shortly after Constantinople and Constantine and all that. The Roman Empire is really around 100. The Roman Empire is already in decline. By the time was Constantine 400, 353. By then it's really in decline. They've moved out of Rome. They're in Constantinople now in a different location. They're trying to, and so then the church, the papacy then is really rising to power and becoming the dominant force from that point forward for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. Now, think about this.
They're probably even part of the sea.
Well, they're represented by religion, but they're in cahoots with political power. So, I mean, there is, these two many times are like this, but not always.
They have political power.
Absolutely. Yeah, an influence. Let me ask you this question. Why are the Dark Ages called the Dark Ages? They didn't have what? They didn't have, why didn't they have the Word of God?
I don't think everybody there, you gotta keep it away from people.
Who kept it away from people? The church. The Roman Catholic Church during the Dark Ages, they restrained the Word to, they were the only ones allowed to have it.
The church is opposite, the Catholic Church is still the Dark Ages because they offer the Bible.
That's metaphorical in nature, but I definitely understand where you're coming from.
In the 1970s or 60s, the Catholic Church, the people there did not read the Word. Because I have
Oh, yeah.
lots of relatives
Sure.
that until that the priest would speak in Latin,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't understand Latin.
Right.
So
They controlled the Word, absolutely, and they especially controlled it during the Dark Ages. And so, now just think from Christ's perspective, His Word being controlled and manipulated by, that's this. That is the beast.
Well, I think the Catholic, in 1 Timothy 4, when it talks about the men who forbid marriage and the same include, it's subtitled apostasy.
Oh, well, first, I'm actually not familiar with that off the top of my head. What does it say? Where'd you say it was?
1 Timothy 4, starting from verse 3 is actually the
1 Timothy 4. Okay.
then the man who forbid marriage and abstain from food.
Oh, that's interesting. But the Spirit, verse 1, explicitly says that in later times some will fall away from the faith. That's the word apostasy, falling away. Paying attention to deceitful spirits and doctrines of demons. By means of hypocrisy of liars seared in their own conscience, as with the brand men who forbid marriage and advocate abstaining from foods which God has created. Well, that is very interesting. I'm glad you pointed that out. That seems to fit. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to dig into that a little bit and see how that plays in here. So let's keep moving on here. We've got just we didn't get started till 35 after because you lollygaggers. So I got 5 minutes. All right. So now in verse 14 is similar to Deuteronomy 13:1-4, which is basically a warning against false prophets. Any image of the beast may refer to a painting, the imprint of a coin, a bust of a stone, or likeness before which the people could bow. So we know this is happening. It happened with Caesar worship. It happened in different forms and fashions. It's happening now, where you're commanded to basically obey or worship a government or a religious entity. In John's day, the image of the emperor contained again the genius of the emperor, so it's kind of like the personality of the emperor. To refuse to bow down meant certain death. In verses 16 and 17, back in Revelation, this is talking about the mark on their hand or their forehead. that no one should be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. In John's day, the result in John's day of failure to worship the emperor, and I know many of you have heard this, but the ichthus, right? You guys, I know you're familiar with this, but many believe this is where it found its origin, is that if someone were attempting to sell to a Christian, the Christian could make in the sand, and then they would know that the other half of that then was that guy did really bad. I can draw a choo-choo train, but not that. Let's see. It kind of goes up like that. Yeah. Yeah, that's a little better. So you'd basically have two lines there and that's called an ichthus. Poorly drawn. But that they could buy and sell that way, but otherwise if they wouldn't bow down, then they were ostracized. Well, you know what we'll do? I want to stop right there and let you chew on this. What then is the mark of the beast? Now, I want to tell you this, because this is true. In Greek thought, numbers and letters were very interchangeable. And so there is archaeological evidence as well as other historical evidence that they would take letters and transpose them into numbers, and then those numbers would represent the letters. So, this number 666 then could possibly represent some letters of a name. So there's your homework. Is that what it means? Because see what it says, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of a man, and his number is 666. So these numbers are representative of an individual. Or are they? So a little homework for you. Have a little fun with that. But there is some interesting things we can gain from that. So we'll pick up right here next week with verse 16 and 17 and find out indeed what is this mark of the beast. All right, does anybody have any questions about these understandings? This is important, because this stuff gets so abused. Anybody have any questions or comments about that? Any thoughts? Everybody clear, is crystal clear? Question?